who are both ethnic minority women. I should state that this session is being recorded and will be available subsequently. I'm going to just do a few minutes just to set the scene and talk through some of the statistics that we have about ethnic diversity in politics. And then we'll go straight over to our two speakers whom we really want to hear from. So as I've said, please stay muted during the webinar, and the session will be recorded and will be available on the Healthy Brum YouTube channel. So next slide, please. So we've got some data about people from minority ethnic backgrounds. Now this data is both all genders, so men and women. And what we can see is that nationally, 10% of our members of parliament, so 66 out of 650, are from minority ethnic backgrounds. Now, population-wise, we'd expect that to be nearer 14%. But as you can see from the graph shown, that has increased over the years. And although the data shown is a count, we have actually looked to see what was the denominator, and that does represent the picture in terms of an increase in proportion over the years. So we are getting there, but there's a bit further to go. And at MP level, just over half of these are women. So in Birmingham, we've got 10 MPs representing our city, and 4 of them are from minority ethnic backgrounds. That compares with half of the population, so a bit further to go there. But 3 of the 4, fantastic, are women. So we're doing well there. If we move on to the other direction, that's it. I think, so looking at local authority councillors, so this is across England, you can see that for the England population is the red, and the England councillors is in blue. So we've got a few more proportion-wise white councillors in England than we would expect for the population, which obviously means that we've got fewer from minority ethnic backgrounds. So clearly there's a bit more work to do there. On to the next slide. Now this is a bit that I find really interesting. So we've got a big orange section, which is white British, and then we've got below there, we've picked out just 5 particular groups. We've got Caribbean, African, Pakistani, Indian, and Bangladeshi. And those together come to about 37% of our population. So what that's telling us is that in this city, 37% of our population is represented by those 5 ethnic minority groups. And that number 37% is really interesting, significant, which we'll come on to later. So if you look at the profile of women of all ages for England, you can see that Birmingham is a much more diverse city. About almost half of our population would represent the diversity that we're just talking about. So moving on to the next slide. Thank you. So political leadership in Birmingham, we've got ethnic minority women and we've got them listed. And I told you about that number 37%. So we've got quite a few listed here. But you can see that 36% of our female councillors in Birmingham are from a non-white ethnic community. And that's fantastic. It means we've got the expected level of representation amongst women councillors. As we've said already, in terms of members of parliament, we've got 3 of our 10 MPs, 3 out of the 4 minority ethnic people is a woman. So I think we're obviously doing some things really, really well in Birmingham, and I hope that's an encouragement to people elsewhere in the country. So moving on then to the reason we're here today. What we'd like to do is to give an opportunity to our 2 leaders who are present to share with us their views of their experience and their journey thus far. So we're going to start with Councillor Thompson, and we will give you about, I'd say probably about 7 to 10 minutes.
Brilliant. And someone's going to have to nudge me at 7 to 10 minutes because I have the ability to talk about this forever. I think the starting point for me is it's important that we have more women from ethnic minority backgrounds in politics. That's a given for me. But I think sometimes we assume that being in politics only means being an elected member. And I just want to make the point that elected members are policy makers and we are also legislators. And we will lobby on those points to make sure that we can get that systemic change that is needed across countries and particularly when it comes to decision making. And the reason why I wanted to say that, because I would say that my entry point into politics did not start as wanting to be an elected member. I really did not. And it didn't even start with me being in politics. My entry point was actually as a local person and as an activist that got involved in different streams of work. So I was involved with a national policy toolkit that supported policymakers when it came to writing policies around lone parents that were in the workplace. I'd spoken in Parliament on several occasions in the Houses of Commons around the need for more engagement with ethnic minority communities and marginalised communities, and that was with Crossbench. And I'd also done some pieces, and I'm talking back sort of 2010 times, when I've had to go to the Home Office and really lobby on things in those veins, particularly around women and ethnic minority communities, particularly. And even then, I would have said that I was not involved in politics. That was my starting point. Moving on, I think a lot of people come into politics because they've got a cause and something that they're particularly interested in. My entry into politics, I guess, it's well documented. I was a council officer for this council for nearly a decade, and I started to see cuts being taken place and things were happening in the communities that I was working in. And I think I was frustrated with politics, to be quite honest with you. I was frustrated with politics, I was frustrated with the social justice system. And eventually someone says to me, when you're frustrated with something and you're frustrated with politics, that's when politics needs you more than you need it, so to speak. And that's when I decided at first not to be a politician, but actually put myself forward to be a magistrate, and sat on the bench for several years and talked in different places from, like I said, Houses of Commons. I was on a platform alongside Reverend Al Sharpton, and also a lot of the American civil rights movement people that come over, which was really interesting. But the key thing for me was I had an issue with the fact that local communities weren't getting what they needed, and had done a lot of things in my own community when I was living in Lee Bank around when there was regeneration, to support the community that I was from. So that was really my starting point. At the point when I actually entered into politics, I was supporting a friend who wanted to stand for election. I had, again, no interest, but I really wanted to support those that were around me. And I helped her with her campaign. And slowly, it was about how do you get people's real voices being brought to the table. People kept encouraging me to come into politics and stand to become a councillor. And eventually I did. And I am where I am now. But I think some of the lessons that I would definitely say from the journey that I've had is, one, if you are going into politics, always have something that you're passionate about. Because over the years, and Mariam can say this as well, a lot of our time has been taken up with potholes and myth collections or something else like that. But actually, when you've got a cause that you can really get stuck into and not just see it from the lobbying perspective, but wanting to see it through to actually making change, and I think that's what we do have the ability to do, it's really worthwhile, and that's what makes a real difference. There's some things that personally that I've been proud of. So, there's little things that I've done in communities that have made a difference to individuals' lives. There was a woman that was an activist, not an activist, she was doing a lot around SEND, and she had SEND children herself, and they'd never been on holiday. And I took her on the Ant and Dec show, and she won a family trip for her and her children. That was something that was going to be really personalised for her, helping people to get work experience. lobbying, not just in Birmingham, but actually presenting a petition for a hospital that was in Nuneaton, and actually getting a decision changed through working with Unite to actually get the decision changed for them not to privatise the hospital. And being involved with that campaign and seeing it through and seeing the change was incredible. And I think as a politician, I think one of the ones that I'm most proud of was the work that I did around exempt accommodation and actually lobbying to the point where we are seeing change taking place through legislation. So I think there's lots of different ways you can get involved at a local level, but also in policy terms, which again is hugely important. But sometimes when we talk about women and ethnic minority women getting into politics, we talk about the bits that are encouraging, the bits that make a difference to people, the best bits of it. But we also can't run away from the fact that it is incredibly difficult at times. The level of trolling and other things like that happen to women, and particularly ethnic minority women, is disproportionate compared to others. And one of the things that I always hold on to is the fact that in politics, self-care has to be something that is something that you need to put at the top of your agenda, because it's not always an easy environment to be in. And there is an African-American writer, Audre Lorde, and she's got a famous quote that says, "Caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation, and it's an act of political warfare." And I think that's really important. It's something that I hold on to as someone that, as part of the Labour Women's Network, trains hundreds of women across the country on political engagement and how to get involved with political, actually getting active in political life. And that's something that I always say to them around that and resilience, because sometimes that's something that we forget often and is absolutely paramount and very important. So I would encourage anybody to get involved in politics. I think if you're not involved in politics, politics is involved with you in terms of policy and everything else that happens around us. Policymakers make a huge amount of decisions, whether that's to do the places we work, educate, and in terms of our families. So it's important that we actively engage, whether it's just at the ballot box, whether it's holding your politicians to account. But there is definitely a need for more people to be involved from a policy perspective and putting themselves forward to become elected members. There is nothing that frustrates me more than what I call career politicians that all sound like the last leader or whatever it is, and they all sound like carbon copies and not like real people in real communities. And I think it's important that we have people from real communities coming into politics and making a difference at a grassroots level, and never forgetting where they come from, and remembering that it's always about the citizens, the communities that we serve, making a difference and actually changing people's lives through policy and legislation. And I'll end there because Mary's camera came on to warn me.
Well done. Literally with seconds to spare. So that was an absolute canter through, but there's lots of really great nuggets in there. I won't summarise it to the moment. I'm going to give Councillor Khan an opportunity to give us her perspective and her reflections.
Thank you, Mary. And it's always a tough one to get politicians to talk about their journeys in like a short space of time. So Sharon, I rate you for being able to do that. I'm going to just try and do the same thing, because I'm sure, like everyone else, I've got a 2 o'clock straight after. So firstly, I think it's wonderful that obviously we've got an opportunity to have a webinar like this, and just giving that sort of reflection back opportunity where you know, where people may know us you know, as cabinet member, as deputy leader, but you know, may not have had that sort of experience or understanding as to how we managed to get into these positions and why we're in these positions. And still, I'm not sure whether I can even touch on that right now. But I was first elected in 2012, and at that point I was 21 years old. I was a university student. In my final year at university, studying economics at the University of Leicester. And when I was first elected, I was the youngest, like back then I was the youngest councillor on the council, in fact for quite a few years, until we ended up finally getting some younger councillors as I was getting older as well. But prior to actually getting elected, picking up on what Sharon said earlier, you know, the entry into politics really kind of sparked into me, or actually through a form of activism and just community involvement. And I have to say, like, it started around the age of 14, which sounds pretty young, but that was the age that I started to sit on different boards and different forums, just representing young people at that point. I was involved in our youth service, and we had like various different kind of networks and projects and things that, you know, we worked on, including things like bits of funding that was around back then, like the Youth Opportunities Funding and the Youth Capital Fund. And I was, you know, I ended up getting myself in a position where I was chairing those boards, making those decisions, speaking to politicians, attending things at the council house, and just kind of seeing how, you know, you can start to make a bit of a difference in your own community. And actually the youth workers that I worked with back then as a young person, excuse me, used to always say, you know, you're going to end up being a councillor or you're going to end up going into politics. And at that point I was like, there's no chance I'm going to do that. Like that, I have no interest whatsoever. And I sort of said that for a good few years, because I genuinely didn't think that was going to end up being the route for me. I just enjoyed keeping myself busy, and just being a bit more active out there when it came to weekends and school holidays and things like that. And then as I kind of, you know, got further into my teenage years, I started taking a bit more of an interest in what's going on in the world around me beyond just sort of in my own local area. So, you know, there was the key point back in 2008, 2009, while I was in sixth form, that I took a bit more of a role with a few friends in organising a demonstration. Back then it was around the Israel and Palestine conflict, in end of 2008, 2009. And that was obviously sort of taking an interest in international affairs, and just ultimately just trying to, I guess, voice our opinions and thoughts of things that were going on. And around the same time, I worked as a youth worker in one of like one of my local youth centres at the Naseby Centre, running the girls youth club. And I was able to interact a lot with young people through all of those different things I've been doing, you know, as a young person. And I recognise the difference that the policies that government were undertaking back then, there was the Conservative and the Lib Dem coalition, and how the impact that would be felt on the ground and the people that I was interacting with. So, you know, for example, when EMA was slashed or the university fees were trebled, I kind of saw how people were disheartened to even apply to university for that reason, and just kind of had conversations with young people around me, and just thought, okay, well, I need to do something here as well, organise a culture of young people to go to a demonstration in London around that issue. And all this time while I was doing this, I guess, on this activist journey that I was on, I still didn't quite think politics is the sort of route for me. It was just something that I was doing because I found that passion in, you know, just there in terms of the sort of person that I grew up to become. Eventually, I did start to have a look more around the political parties and sort of what their policies looked like, and I had an encouragement from my uncle, who was back then, who was a councillor as well, and he sort of encouraged me and said, you know, have a look at all three of the mainstream parties, see where you feel like your views align with. He didn't say join the Labour Party. He is a Labour Party member and has been for like decades. So he didn't straight up say that to me. He just sort of said, have a look, see what you think. And I started to like look into it, watch things on the news, and just watch Newsnight and just, you know, sort of things like that, just to see how I feel and whose views kind of fit in with mine. Eventually, I did end up joining the Labour Party. Fast forward, started campaigning and volunteering, partially just to get my CV built up as a young person, just so I had a bit more experience of things, and just because I thought whatever I end up doing, it will look good, because I've got, you know, I've always kept myself busy and things. Back in 2012, there was an opportunity for an AWS, which is an all-women's shortlist in the ward that I now represent, and I was approached because I'd already started doing things within the party, just sort of campaigning and helping out in other people's elections. And I was asked whether I'd be interested in standing. I was in my final year at university, as I said, and I was really, I didn't understand how it would even be possible. But my parents asked me and said, "Do you want to? If you're interested, we're happy to sort of make it work and support you." And I said yes. Basically, if it seems doable, then I'm happy to take the plunge. And yeah, so I was first elected back then. Since then, I've had 4 terms as a councillor. I've had various roles in the council, from chairing scrutiny committees, to the audit committee, being part of inquiries, and then and then obviously now I'm a cabinet member for health and social care. But before, I know Mary's back on the screen, but before I sort of try and conclude, I have to say that apart from just kind of this is how I got into it, it's really important for me to just have a moment to reflect the challenges that we face as women and have faced as women. From the moment that I first was interested in actually standing for elections, there was a lot of internal pressure, and one, because I was so young, one, because I was a woman, and then I came from a Pakistani background where at that point it was almost unheard of and unspoken of for women from this sort of background to go and enter a sphere that was just so male dominated. And to top it off, a Pakistani, I wore a hijab, I was so young. There was a lot of sort of backlash, firstly internally from the community and just kind of, the people who had opinions about it. But I had a really supportive family, which helped me to sort of overcome those barriers and challenges. And then since being a councillor, I've been around for 11 years now, and I guess over time you end up growing sort of thicker and thicker skin and just understanding, where your sort of limits and barriers are, but and the boundaries. But I have to say that, the challenges that women face in politics are far greater than what my male colleagues have faced, and we see it day in, day out when it comes to challenges from the local community, when it comes to making sure that our voice is heard even amongst our own colleagues. It's not as easy as it might sort of come across. There's a lot of kind of pushback that we generally, I guess, end up facing on a day-to-day basis. But for me, in terms of the final words of just encouragement, if it's something, whatever the field is, if you're interested in and you've got passion and drive behind it, for whatever reason, you will end up just getting through and having that sort of drive and commitment to just overcome those challenges. And I guess, my experience, I've also got a lot of good people around me, and I see my role now as being someone who's been there for quite a few years in my 4th term, to be able to also be that kind of supportive person for other women who are entering politics, or other women who are interested in doing it. So yeah, it's really difficult for me to try and even give you a wider kind of picture of the journey and the impact and all the rest of it. But that's how I got into it, and it hasn't been easy. It's been a struggle, and there's definitely inequalities when it comes to the way men are treated compared to women when you're in that world. But I guess going back to how I started, the only reason we do it is because we enjoy it. So and we enjoy making a difference, because it wouldn't be possible if you didn't enjoy it. So I'm going to hand back to Mary now and just
thank you.
Just say thank you for inviting us.
No, thank you both. And I know it was always going to be a tall order. Even if you'd had an hour each, it wouldn't have covered the richness of experience and things you'd want to share with us. I think I will come back to you both for sort of it's going to be a 60-second take-home message, but some of the things that have come through from both of you, so some very clear themes about getting involved in engagement. I was really delighted that the point was made about the civic engagement and not having to be an elected member to be involved, because absolutely that's a space that most of us are in. So that's a very clear, obvious situation that many people can use straight away. Having that thing you're passionate about, and remembering that thing you're passionate about, so that when the going gets tough, that keeps you motivated, that keeps you coming back, persevering through the various challenges. I like the comments about self-care. I mean, these would apply to women in leadership anywhere, or people in leadership anywhere, but particularly recognizing, where your supportive family, where your passion comes from, where your support comes from. and being able to tap into those and overcome challenges on the way. So lots of really, really useful things. I'm going to say 60 seconds, take home message. I'm going to start with you, Councillor Khan.
So I guess I'd just like to say that for anyone that's either interested in a sort of taking the step into activism, into civic engagement, into politics, or even in any leadership role, you've got to have that commitment and that passion, and ultimately do whatever you think is right by you. That's, I guess, the only sort of final kind of take back, and also that the challenges that you do have and the barriers that you do face, just know deep down inside that I'm biased, but I do feel like women are way stronger than men, so you will end up overcoming them, and just keep on going. And if ever you feel that you're a bit unsure, then just look around at the fantastic women that you've got around you to turn to for support, because we are a supportive sisterhood out there, and people are there to kind of give that encouragement. So that's all. Thank you.
And Councillor Thompson, last words to you.
Okay, so if you're thinking of going into politics, the first thing I would say, understand your own politics. All parties will try and recruit is a strong word, but encourage people to join their party. But you have to understand where your baseline comes from. Jess Phillips always told me, just ask. So if there's something that you want to know, you're thinking about getting involved, reach out to someone that's already in the space and see if they can give you some advice and support. Shabana Mahmood always told me, go straight to the legislation, whether it's on a campaign or anything else like that, because the bottom line is legislation and policy, the key drivers that would help us to change things on a permanent basis, or at least more sustainable one. So making sure that when you're campaigning on something, you understand what's actually there in terms of what you want to change. And I think the other one is a really, and I think it should be in all forms of life. My principle is I will never, what I would call, drag another female, and particularly ethnic minority female, who is in politics. So the key thing is, do not publicly personalise an individual. You can talk about their ideology, you can talk about their politics, but when we start getting into the space of she looks like this and she does this and all those personal things, we've got to remember that the sisterhood is there, and we've got to support people that are coming through, no matter what it is we're doing, whether it's politics or not. I was trying to be quick. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you both. And I appreciate we've got really busy diaries, so really, really value your taking time out to share with us these reflections. You've given us loads to think about. There's been lots of synergy between both your experiences and your messages for us. So I think for anyone out there, this is definitely one to watch. Thank you again, both of you. And thank you to our audience. Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.